Don't say I didn't warn you. I told you that we would be coming back to osmosis over and over again in the class. It's a really important force in biology, and here we are again. Um, Allow me to remind you that with osmosis, it is as if water is following solute. So if you want solute to go in one direction, you just if you want water to go in one direction, you just throw a solute on the other side of the membrane and water will just run right after it. Let me also remind you that it is critical that the fluids of the human body are isotonic to the optimal environment inside of our living cells. If the water around our cells is hypertonic, it'll draw water out of the cells and kill them. If the fluid around the cells is hypotonic, water will enter the cells and pop them and kill them. Okay, so dead cells is what will happen. But what keeps the solute concentration of our blood so perfect? Well, it's not you, right? When you decide, oh, should I have more salt on my food? You don't go, oh no, I'm about to become hypertonic and I'll die. Or when someone says, hey, would you like a glass of water? It's really hot outside. You don't go, oh no, I'll become hypotonic and I'll die. And the reason you don't have to worry about that is because your kidneys are taking care of it. So take a moment if you need to remind yourself of osmosis, and we will move ahead. So the renal pyramid and the collecting duct. When you were learning the anatomy of the kidney, you learned that there was this outer portion called the renal cortex, and then from the arcuate arteries and veins on inward, this was called the medulla, and that there were structures in the medulla that are known as renal pyramids. Those renal pyramids are super important. So let's go over here and look at the renal pyramid. So this yellow outline is like one lobe of the kidney. Oh, here's the renal pyramid. It is not obvious from looking at it. However, this area here is isotonic to the rest of your body. However, as you go from this point inward, the environment gets more and more and more hypertonic. It gets hypertonic. That means it kind of gets saltier and saltier and saltier as you go down here towards the renal papilla. The kidney is at its saltiest right here at the beginning of the papilla. How did that happen? How did this area called the renal pyramid get to be hypertonic, and why do we want it that way? Well, it got to be hypertonic because of the action of this guy, the nephron loop, particularly these really long nephron loops. These really long nephron loops on the way down, we'll talk about that in a second, but on the ascending limb of the nephron loop, this ascending limb of the nephron loop is very actively grabbing salt from inside of the tube and putting it into this area of the renal pyramid. And because this loop is busy actively reabsorbing sodium and potassium and chloride from within the loop and storing it here in the renal pyramid, that this part of the renal pyramid gets to be really, really salty, and that is what we need. Now, the saltiness, the hypertonic nature of the renal pyramid and getting more and hypertonic as it goes towards the papilla is used by two parts of this system. It will get used by the descending limb of the loop of Henle. And remember, if it's saltier here than it is in there, water will want to leave by osmosis. So the descending limb of the loop of Henle will allow the kidney to reabsorb about a third of the water that started this journey. Remember, almost 2/3 of it got reabsorbed right here at the proximal convoluted tubule. Now nearly another third is going to get absorbed here at the descending limb of the loop of Henle. The ascending limb of the loop of Henle is what set up this system. However, right here at the collecting duct, this is where your body is going to fine-tune the watering of your urine, and in doing so is going to make sure that the osmolarity of all of your fluids are isotonic. Let me do a recap. If my blood is too watery, if my blood is hypotonic, I would want to make a very watery urine to get rid of the extra water that's making my fluids too watery, right? On the other hand, if I'm dehydrated, I haven't been drinking enough water, and my body fluids are starting to get a little bit hypertonic, I would want to create a very, very hypertonic urine to get rid of the solute more than the water, so that the water would stay behind and dilute out the saltiness that is me. And again, we go back to normal. How does this happen? So there is a gradient of saltiness. You don't need to memorize these numbers, but isotonic for the human body is right here at about 300. And as you go down through the renal pyramid, it gets more and more and more hypertonic. So it's all the way like 4 times too salty by the time it gets to the renal papilla. How did that happen? It happened because of the ascending limb of the nephron loop. And it is going, that osmolarity gradient will be used by, let's see, the descending limb of the nephron loop and by the collecting duct. Okay, so we are now really just going to be thinking about the collecting duct. Okay, the collecting duct is what concentrates your urine. Now, all along the journey, your body has been reabsorbing water. So there is a smaller volume, a much smaller volume of fluid right here at the end of the distal convoluted tubule than started out here. By the time the fluid has gone from here to there, probably 98%, 99% of the water has been reabsorbed along with all of the glucose, all of the amino acids, etc. Okay? But the fluid that's here, it is still isotonic, essentially. Okay, it's not quite isotonic, but we'll try and simplify it here for AP 120. Now, if I have been drinking plenty of water, then I'm fine with a good amount of water leaving my body, and I would like it to just zip on through my collecting duct as if the collecting duct were made out of plastic, right? Sometimes the collecting duct acts like it's made out of plastic. By that I mean, sometimes the collecting duct will not allow water to leave. Water, as it goes through this collecting duct, it wants to go from whatever concentration it is into this hypertonic area on the outside. When the collecting duct is just like a plastic tube, it doesn't matter what the water wants, the water can't leave. And in that case, we would make a larger volume of dilute urine, and you're used to that. If you were super nervous and so you drank like a big old quart of water before something, you know that the urine that you make is going to be a lot of it and real watery. That will happen because the collecting duct is acting like a plastic tube. However, if you need to save that water, if your body's like, oh, no, we need all that water to stay behind because we are too hypertonic right now. We want just pure water to stay behind to dilute out our saltiness. Then if there are little holes in the collecting duct that specifically allow water to go through them, water would leave through those little holes by the process of osmosis. So at this moment here, water is like, oh, it's so salty out there. I wish I could go by osmosis, but the collecting duct won't let me because it's acting like plastic. And then 10 minutes later, you could have a collecting duct that's like, you want to leave? Fine, go, okay? Because it has presented little water doors that'll go through that, okay? So the osmolarity, as you get down to the renal papilla, the end of the renal pyramid, is 4 times as concentrated. If the collecting duct is not permeable, water cannot leave and the urine ends up being dilute. If the collecting duct is permeable, water can leave and the urine is really concentrated, strong, the urine becomes hypertonic. We would want our urine to be dilute when our blood is too dilute. That'll help fix it. We would want our urine to be extra concentrated when our blood is too concentrated. That'll fix it, right? Now, how is it that the collecting duct can sometimes be permeable and sometimes not be permeable? How is it that that can happen? Aha! It'll be because of your posterior pituitary, which you learned in the endocrine system, that the posterior pituitary is the neurohypophysis. It makes only two different hormones. It makes oxytocin. This is not about oxytocin, and anti-diuretic hormone. Anti-diuretic. Anti means it's against it. Diuretic means to make a lot of urine. Anti-diuretic hormone from the posterior pituitary is against you making a lot of urine, so it's in favor of you making a really concentrated urine, right? So when the hypothalamus senses that your blood is getting too salty, that your blood is getting hypertonic, the hypothalamus will sense it's too salty and tell the posterior pituitary to release anti-diuretic hormone, ADH. And that ADH, anti-diuretic hormone, will go to, do I have it here? Let's go back here. That anti-diuretic hormone will go here to the collecting duct, and it will put little holes in the collecting duct. They've got a name. We've got it on a later slide. And those little holes will allow water to stay. And when water stays behind, the urine that comes out is like half the water's been taken out of it. And so it gets small and concentrated. Boom. Okay. So anti-diuretic hormone will make the collecting duct more permeable. How? It stimulates the placement of little tiny water doors, they're proteins, of course they are, called aquaporins into the cells of the collecting duct. At this moment, what we're looking at here, there are high levels of anti-diuretic hormone. High levels of anti-diuretic hormone, lots of aquaporins, water can stay behind. Water stays behind because of osmosis. When the water stays behind, the urine that is made is very concentrated. It is hypertonic, and because it's hypertonic, there's a small amount and it looks very amber, as they're indicating here. If anti-diuretic hormone were not here, there would be no aquaporins. The water would be forced to stay. You'd make a large volume of watery urine. Okay? So a little more detail, okay? A little more detail, which is a lot like the story of insulin back in the endocrine system. When anti-diuretic hormone binds to its target cells here in the collecting duct, it'll say, hey, we need aquaporins. The cell will say, oh, I've got some aquaporins stuck down in here somewhere. Let me just get them. It gets them out, puts them in the cell membrane. While the aquaporins are there, that's an aquaporin, there's an aquaporin, water can go through this cell. And when it can go through the cell, it goes back into the body, being attracted by the osmotic quality of the renal pyramid. And then you make a small amount of concentrated urine. If anti-diuretic hormone goes away, then those aquaporins go away. And at this moment, that collecting duct is just acting like a completely plastic tube. Water is trapped inside, and you make a very watery urine. All right? We will finish up this discussion of the hormonal control of blood pressure and the tonicity of your blood at the beginning of the next video.